A few years ago, I watched Big Joe's A Surprisingly Passionate Defense of Twilight video, and I have not stopped thinking about the series since. It is a real problem. All of my friends are annoyed. It is all I talk about. That video was so revelatory to me because it felt like one of the first times that someone asked, why is Twilight so beloved? And instead of saying that girls just like bad things sometimes, or that it's dumb cheese, his answer was that the text is so thematically rich that it cannot help but captivate. I typically don't like Twilight defense videos because they tend to cede too much ground. They give too much credence to the criticisms of Twilight. Big Joe acknowledges the criticisms of Twilight, both good faith and bad, but feels no particular need to interact with them, and neither do I. He found something beautiful in the text and shared it, and that is what I aim to do in this video. I generally consider this a companion video to Big Joe's, and highly recommend watching that one before checking this one out. I'll probably end up rehashing a lot of his points, and I'll try to play his videos when I do that so you know just how unoriginal I am. Part 1. Vampires. Twilight is a power fantasy, and for that purpose, I want to start with the vampires. A lot has been said about how Twilight vampires aren't scary.
Look, the vampire sparkles. Let's just do this accent. That's not scary at all. It's just weird and silly. Truly a disgrace to the horror tradition. But I don't think that Italian man is being entirely fair.
In Twilight, vampires are impossibly strong and fast. They're beautiful and immortal. All of their senses are enhanced. They can see, hear, and smell for miles. Their skin is nearly impenetrable, cold and hard as granite. They do not eat, they do not sleep, they never tire. They have perfect memories, they have no identifiable weaknesses. They are nearly impossible to kill. In fact, the only known way to kill a vampire is to rip their bodies apart, burn the pieces, and most importantly, pray that that works. In sunlight, they do not burn. Instead, they expose their true selves. They shine with brilliance like the gods that they are. The reason that they don't venture into the sun is because if humanity saw them in their natural form, we would feel so small and insignificant that we would either give of ourselves freely or pointlessly try to kill the creature. Probably both. To put it simply, the vampires in Twilight are too perfect in their horror to be scary. If they want you dead, you're dead, and that's it. I would say resisting is a waste of time, but the thought of a human wasting a vampire's time is laughable. And on top of that, sometimes they just have superpowers. And they even smell nice.
I'm the world's most dangerous predator. Everything about me invites you in. My voice, my face, even my smell.
All of this is to say that in Twilight, vampires do not wield power. They are the embodiment of power itself. And what is the one defining characteristic of a vampire in Twilight?
To Twilight, what makes a vampire is that it has an unquenchable and painful urge to consume human blood.
They want blood. They want to destroy. Vampires are power, and power inherently seeks to destroy. Power is also inhuman. In Breaking Dawn, when Bella is seeing Charlie for the first time since becoming a vampire, Alice and the Cullens coach her on how to appear human.
These will irritate your eyes at first.
Main thing is not to move too fast.
And blink at least 3 times a minute.
Hold your breath. It'll help with the thirst.
Just don't forget to move your shoulders so it looks like you're breathing.
And don't sit so straight.
Yeah.
Humans don't do that.
In this scene, it is clear that anything about a vampire that resembles a human, anything that is not fundamentally unnerving is an act, because vampires are power, and power, in addition to seeking to destroy, is inhuman.
Power is inhuman.
We also see the destructive inhumanity of power with the wolves, who literally turn into beasts for power. Part 2. Wolves. The wolves, the other magical creatures in Twilight, have a fundamentally different relationship to power. They are not made of power like vampires. They are still fundamentally human. They still generate warmth. They have weaknesses. They are flesh and bone. They eat. They sleep. They die. Compared to vampires, they aren't particularly difficult to kill. They retain some power as humans, but can only kill a vampire in beast form. They can't turn on their telepathy when they're humans, and they cannot turn it off when they are wolves. In Twilight, wolves do not embody power. They are humans who can wield it, and they struggle to control it. In Eclipse, Billy Black tells the very fictional history that Meyer gave a very real Native American tribe, and we learn that although they received this power by accident, it is meant to protect. And by protect, I mean kill vampires. A noble goal indeed. A good vampire is a dead vampire, so killing them is an unquestioned good. For the wolves, power is a tool that they use exclusively for good. But intentions aside, power still seeks to destroy. This is perhaps most easily seen with Sam and Emily. Sam imprinted on Emily.
Imprinting on someone is like, all of a sudden, it's not gravity holding you to the planet. It's her.
From that moment on, she became the thing tying him to the planet. His life is surely forfeit to hers in every way. But every time we see her, we see a large scar on her face that reminds us of the one time Sam lost control and the wolf hurt her. How much Sam loved her did not matter. How much it devastated Sam to bring her pain, it didn't matter. This is because Meyer wants to impress upon us that no matter what it is used for, no matter how much it protects you, power is destructive in its very nature. Part 3. Bella. So how does Bella interact with this word of power? I find much of Twilight discourse consists of bringing up a time or way that Edward wields power over Bella and calling it bad. He's much older than her, he gaslights her, he watches her sleep. All that is fair and worth bringing up, but it doesn't answer the questions that I have about Twilight. Twilight is a monster dating series that is immensely popular with girls and women. The monster dating genre in general has a difficult task to overcome, because monsters are bad, so dating them is bad. So why do women want to date monsters? And in a patriarchal society, where men have and wield power over women at every step, both consciously and unconsciously, is it even possible for a heterosexual woman to not date a monster? A lot of series try to resolve this by making their monsters more human, more likable, more normal. But not Twilight.
I feel like vampire media always has to be in love with the idea that it's better to be human because the audience is human. So it's weird if your conclusion is just, being a vampire is awesome! Hell yeah! Only Twilight had the guts to do that.
In Twilight, vampires are power, and Bella wants a vampire. Bella wants power. She wants power inside of her. She wants to become power. She lusts after it. And though Meyer's clear that power is inhuman, Bella's lust for it is never painted in a negative light. But Bella does not have power. Bella is a human in a monster story. She has no physical power. She's clumsy. She's awkward. She's very self-conscious. She doesn't describe herself as particularly pretty. She's selfless to a fault and has no real ability to meaningfully impact her own story. We are introduced to her when she is forced to leave her home because of decisions made by other people. In New Moon, Bella tries to stop Edward from exposing himself, and she is so ineffective that he thinks that she's a ghost. In Eclipse, Bella punches Jacob in the face and breaks her own hand. Meyer wants us to feel this absolute lack of power. If vampires are the embodiment of power, then Bella is the embodiment of powerlessness. But in lieu of power, Bella possesses something that all the supernatural creatures of her world do not. Agency. Big Joe explains pretty clearly how the monsters in Twilight do not have agency.
At every step in the process, there is no choice, no autonomy. If Jacob is to be happy, if Edward is to be happy, it will be a forced happiness, a pleasure that is coming for them, in which they will try to fight against and fail.
But I want to talk about how Bella does express agency in the story. You see, I have a particular definition for agency in media. I feel like most people define it as a character having the ability to make decisions that affect the plot of a story. But since stories exist in a world that is entirely controlled by an all-knowing God a la the writer, I do not believe that character decisions actually have the ability to meaningfully impact the plot, because the author can at any point undermine any decision a character makes. I think that character agency exists when the narrative rewards the desires of the characters, provided that the characters pursue the things that they want throughout the story. Agency exists when characters do not settle for a life they do not deserve. By this definition, too often do I see women's agency undermined in media. To list a few examples. In Frozen, Anna likes a guy and wants to be together with him. Nope, he's an egotistical murderer. She'll be with the other guy. In Tall Girl, Jodie wants to date a hot tall guy. Nope, he's kind of a jerk one time. She'll date her weird short friend instead. These characters' wants do not matter. They will be with whoever the story tells them to be with, and the narrative will destroy anything that comes in between that. But in Twilight, Bella's desires are constantly affirmed by the story.
And the interesting thing about Twilight is that this structure, where a choice is presented, Bella makes her decision quickly and then just kind of gets what she wants and enjoys it, repeats itself over and over throughout the movies.
Thank you, Big Joe. Can you give an example?
Toward the beginning of the series, Bella decides that she wants to be a vampire. And after that, all the obstacles standing in the way just kind of vanish over time. Then Bella becomes a vampire, and she loves it. Never feels like she made a mistake. Always excited to be a vamp.
Any more?
There are other examples of this too. Let's just rattle off 2 more.
Actually, I'll just let people watch your video. But this is how Melissa Rosenberg, Twilight screenwriter, describes Bella.
So it was really looking at the character of Bella and assessing what does drive her. And interestingly, the thing that drives her is Bella wants what she wants. She wants sex. She wants sex with Edward. She wants Edward. And she doesn't stop going for what she wants to go for, you know? So interestingly, she is very proactive emotionally. So it was really about translating that to the screen.
I assert that Bella has agency because she relentlessly pursues what she wants and then she gets it. The narrative rewards her at every turn. Bella simply will not settle for a life she does not deserve.
I will not accept a life I do not deserve.
Even though I would argue that Bella experiences absolute agency in her own story in a way that the other characters simply do not. It is very easy to feel as if she does not.
See, since Bella makes all her choices immediately, since they're always the right call, since they always end up rewarding her without much resistance, it starts to feel like she's not really choosing anything at all.
But I would argue that the reason it feels like Bella does not have agency is because, as discussed earlier, unlike the men and monsters in her story, Bella does not have power. Bella cannot meaningfully make decisions that affect the plot because Bella cannot express power. But interestingly enough, power cannot be expressed onto Bella. Superpowers just don't work on her. Edward and Aro can't read her mind. Jane can't compel her towards pain. She cannot be compelled. Her decisions are her own. Bella cannot express power, but like our goddess before her, Haruhi Suzumiya, the word expresses power for her. One of my favorite parts about Twilight is how everyone is obsessed with Bella for no reason. Stacy immediately adopts her. All the boys want to date her. The girls either love her or are jealous of her. In the second book, she ignores all of her friends for months and then says hi one day, and they welcome her with open arms, eager to spend as much time with her as they can. And that's just the humans. Edward and Jacob are both immediately obsessed with her. When Alice meets her, she basically says, "Hey, I'm going to be obsessed with you one day. It might as well be today." Rosalie, the only person who doesn't like her, ends up being her fiercest protector in the last book. James, Laurent, and Victoria all die because they just need to kill Bella when they simply could have not. James wants to kill her because she's protected. Victoria for revenge. Laurent just because. But at every point, Bella didn't actually do anything. An entire coven gone without reason. At least without any reason that meaningfully involves Bella. But of course they are obsessed with Bella because the word is beholden to her. Twilight is a power fantasy, but it functions fundamentally different from most. Bella doesn't have power, but unlike most power fantasies, she does not receive power, not at least until halfway through the final book. But power doesn't work on her, and the word itself will protect Bella from any and every physical threat. If you try to kill her, you will die. No matter how perfect your plan is, Bella is protected always by the story. And more than just protecting her, the story of Twilight will actively accomplish all of her goals for her. Bella does nothing, and nothing she did would matter. And yet she gets everything she ever wanted. So yeah, I agree. It feels like she doesn't have agency.
Bella does not seek out pleasure. She's simply a vessel through which pleasure forcefully operates.
And that all sounds very unsatisfying, yet somehow it isn't. Because if you exist in this world without power, it is very nice to think, what if I could shoot lasers from my eyes? That is how most power fantasies work. Twilight has the guts to tell you that you will most likely exist in this world without power. And the fantasy is, what if you didn't need it? The fantasy is, what if you lived in a world where if you simply leaned into your desires, then fulfillment and happiness were unavoidable forces that were coming for you. Forces that would swallow everything in their path until your will was the only thing left standing. To someone, like women and other marginalized people who know that this word will not simply give them power. That sounds incredibly cathartic. So, power and agency have a paradoxical relationship in Twilight. The men and monsters have near absolute power, yet they have no control over themselves or their lives. Bella has no power, but her agency is absolute. And this all leads to my problem with the third Twilight movie, Eclipse. Part 4. My problem with the movie Eclipse. Eclipse is undoubtedly the worst book in the Twilight series. But like the worst Paramore album, it is still a masterpiece. This is because it fundamentally misunderstands the point of the series.
Because the book isn't about violence. It's a kinky Christian sex power fantasy where everyone's obsessed with Bella for no reason. The world building and conflict exists because the whole book can't just be Bella and Edward looking at each other going,
Twilight is about Bella and Edward's pining relationship. Everything else is just filler. Good filler, but filler nonetheless. So what happens with our main couple in Eclipse? At the end of New Moon, Bella arguably falls in love with Jacob, definitively rejects him, and gets engaged to Edward.
Don't make me choose. Because it'll be him.
Marry me, Bella.
By the end of Eclipse, Bella realizes that she is in love with Jacob, rejects him definitively, and is engaged to Edward.
I love him.
I love you more. I'm gonna need that ring.
There's no development in the primary relationship of the series, so the book ends up feeling more like a novella. Side stories to flesh out the word in between actual novel. The book fails because it has more word building and conflict than Edward and Bella going, And yet, the word building and conflict is pretty good. Eclipse has some of my favorite moments in the entire series. So if I'm going to criticize Eclipse, I want to start off with the things that I like. Since nothing really happens with Edward and Bella, Eclipse has a lot of time to build character and backstory, and it uses this time wisely. Bella goes to a Quileute meeting and hears the stories about how their spirits fuse with wolves. And if, like Meyer, you completely forget that the Quileute are real people with their own myths and histories that shouldn't just be made up for fun, then this moment's pretty great. We get to see that magic has a deep history in this world, and it is wild and unpredictable. We also get to spend more time with the Cullens and learn their backstories, which are all very rich. Carlisle wanted to help people, and didn't let becoming a vampire, which is fundamentally at odds with that desire, stop him. He tortured himself for years to accomplish this goal, and he still thinks of himself as a soulless, damned creature. Rosalie's story was extremely tragic for reasons I don't particularly want to get into, but the film gave her a very cathartic ending.
I was a little theatrical back then.
And we learn that she wanted a child and will never have one, which is one of the reasons that she is not immediately enamored with Bella. This is all interesting and becomes very important in the final book. But then we get to Jasper. Jasper was a Confederate soldier who was turned by a very alluring and manipulative vampire named Maria. I should mention that I don't get the romantic notion that many white authors have about Confederate soldiers, but I don't want to dwell on it. Maria uses Jasper to raise an army of newborn vampires. I think newborn vampires being extremely strong because they're fresh and full of human blood is a cool and interesting world building aspect. And the thought of creating a bunch of them just so they can fight and die pointlessly for someone else's interest is just so incredibly creative and weird and cruel that I just kind of love it. But all of that is really just extra. The reason that I forgive Eclipse for all of his faults is because it contains my favorite moment in the entire Twilight series. Bella realizing that she is in love with Jacob. Let me set the scene. Right before Victoria's relatively unimportant vampire army attack, in a rare moment of pettiness, Edward reveals to Jacob that he and Bella are engaged. Jacob leaves and Bella chases after. Jacob, who admittedly is kind of being a baby about it, is so distraught that he needs to get away and destroy or be destroyed. Bella knows that he shouldn't fight in this weakened mental state and is desperate for him to be safe and close to her. So she asks him to kiss her.
I'm asking you to kiss me.
And it is bad. Just a terrible kiss. Jacob is angry and spiteful. Bella is not engaging. She wants it to end. But then, in a fit of rage, Bella tries to yank him away from her. But Jacob is so strong that he mistakes her pulling his hair as passion. He melts. He becomes defenseless before her. And that melts Bella. And then she is kissing him in a way that she could never kiss Edward. And in that moment, she realizes that she'd been lying to herself. She realizes that she is in love with Jacob. I didn't know that Bella could be in love with someone who wasn't Edward. And neither did she. And that changed everything for me. Just like Bella, all of a sudden I saw it. I saw a million possibilities that Bella's life could be. I saw her future with Jacob. I saw her future with Mike. I saw her going to college and meeting some new human guy who's much better than any of the Twilight guys. I saw warmth for Bella. I saw kids for Bella. I saw life. Actual human breathing life for Bella. Because when she realized that she was in love with Jacob, then for the first time I realized that she didn't have to be with Edward. She didn't have to be cold. She didn't have to die. Bella's happy ending could be anyone else. So if her story ends cold, dead, and with Edward, it is because that is what she chooses. So why did this moment even happen in Eclipse? Bella obviously fell in love with Jacob in New Moon. He basically saved her life, helped her become a person again. So why do we need an entire book of plot and backstory and action just to get to a moment that already should have happened? I assert that it is because, as discussed earlier, Twilight is obsessed with Bella's agency. Because nothing happens in Twilight if Bella doesn't will it. No plan formed against her shall prosper. So if Edward decides that he should leave Bella, if Edward decides that she should have a human life and Bella disagrees, then he cannot be proven right. Only when Bella is most secure in her relationship with Edward, when they are engaged and he has repeatedly made clear that he will support her in any endeavor, only when Bella chooses to kiss Jacob, asks him herself, only when Jacob has not even a hint of triumph and is made defenseless in front of her, Only when Bella is absolutely free to choose does she allow herself to be in love with Jacob. And only then do we get to see that being with Edward was her choice all along. Because Bella will not settle for a life she does not deserve. But this isn't quite how it plays out in the film. The film has all the same beats, all the same moments, all the same feelings, but something is off in the presentation.
I know she's in love with you.
Oh, good.
But she's in love with me too.
I don't know what happened.
You love her.
I love you more.
I know.
Why are these men telling us how Bella feels? A defining feature of Edward and Bella's relationship is that he can't read her mind. So why is he telling me that she's in love with Jacob? When Edward says you love him, why is Bella immediately saying, I love you more? I mean, it's true, but it doesn't capture the emotion of the moment. It completely ignores the revelation that she is in love with someone else. In the book, Bella felt so guilty that she wanted to die. And I get that the filmmakers didn't want to stop the movie dead to have Bella internally monologue to us. And I get that no matter how true it was, Bella would never tell Edward that she was in love with Jacob, and the filmmakers had to respect that. I get that, but they were wrong. This is the most important moment in the series. They should stop the plot dead. It's not like any of this Victoria nonsense matters. Bella should have done a voiceover. They should have shown us a dream sequence of a happy life with Jacob and little black-haired children. They should have had Bella say it out loud. They should have done something. Because this is the moment that solidifies that Twilight is and has always been about choice and agency. So if Bella is in love with Jacob, then Bella and no one else needs to say it, needs to feel it. Because no, Big Joe.
She's simply a vessel through which pleasure forcefully operates.
Bella is not a vessel through which pleasure forcefully operates. And I know that because Bella and no one else gets to choose.
Which decision is she referring to?
And you're right, Big Joe. I can't identify any specific choice that she made to get her happy ending, but I know she chose it because it could have been anyone else. Part 5. Conclusion. So Twilight is the story of a person who does not have power but still exerts her will on the world, gets everything she wants, and is happy. A fantasy indeed. And I love it. You know, while there's no doubt that Twilight experienced a huge surge in popularity in the last few years for a number of very definable reasons, I've never really liked the label of the Twilight Renaissance. It makes the love of Twilight sound like a fad or a time that will pass, and I disagree. Twilight has been such a defining part of our cultural zeitgeist for more than a decade. We bring it up whenever Robert Pattinson or Kristen Stewart get a new big role. It has been a hugely influential piece of media that has set the stage for the popularity of many other series, good and bad. It has become the cultural landmark for teenagers, vampires, and monster dating in general. And while I agree that the popularity of Twilight will ebb and flow like all things, it has just always been such a hugely popular series that I hate slapping this time-sensitive moniker onto it. Because I know only time will tell, but I truly believe that Twilight will outlive us all. But that all being said, I do think that one reason for the current adoration of Twilight is specifically how it functions as a power fantasy. Because many people have felt powerless in recent years. I know I have. I've seen children die in schools, black men die in the street, a raging global pandemic, feeling like my country's not on my side, worsening natural disasters, and it all gets to be too much. I'm so tired all of the time. And yeah, I could watch a normal power fantasy. I could watch some anime isekai where a regular kid gets reincarnated to a fantasy world where he's suddenly the most powerful being in existence. And I do sometimes. And I like it. But sometimes it feels a bit hollow, because I know that this world will not suddenly give me power. So stories like that end up feeling a bit too escapist. And the truth of the matter is, I don't actually want to escape the world. It is the only one I have, and I love it. And for this reason, I find myself coming back to Twilight. Because when I felt as powerless as I ever have, Twilight tells me that I most likely will not receive power, but that's okay. Because in Twilight, there is an inherent goodwill in the world. A goodness that is so self-evident that power cannot stand against it. And as long as, like Bella, I keep believing in that goodwill and following my desires, then the world will have no choice but to move towards that same end. And I know that that sounds really hokey and sentimental, but it's really been something that I can hold on to when I haven't been able to hold on to much else.
Part 6. Actual conclusion.
One thing I've been dancing around in this video is that Bella does receive power in Twilight. She becomes a vampire, which, as stated, is the ultimate embodiment of power. And she thrives at it. As a newborn, she is the strongest and fastest of the Cullens. Her superpower as a shield increases. She doesn't struggle with bloodlust, at least not as much as the others. She has a good time. This is undoubtedly a good ending to the story, but a bit unsatisfying. So much of Twilight concerns itself with Bella's lust for power, and then in the end, she is just given said power in a way that we will not. I think that this works to create an unquenchable lust for power in the audience itself, and a dissatisfaction with the world that will not give it to them. I think that this is one of the reasons that Twilight's fandom, current and former, tends to skew more feminist. I think that the themes of Twilight work to create a generation of people who want to rise up, take power, and create a better world. Is that a lofty claim? Kind of. But no more lofty than the people who claim that Twilight is sex negative or anti-feminist or whatever. So I believe in the power fantasy. I believe that, like Bella, us, the powerless, can receive power and wield it better and kinder than it ever has been before. So like Melissa Rosenberg, screenwriter for Twilight, I take feminist ownership of the series. Let's change the world.
I guess some feminists would consider Twilight to stain on a feminist reputation. Jessica Jones was my answer to those feminists. But looking back, and it's interesting to have this opportunity to look back and go, no, actually, I take full ownership of Twilight and the feminism in there. If you look at it, she is driving this story, and it's a story about empowerment. But, I credit Stephanie as well for creating a story that women want to see and hear and read about and get themselves involved in. So this is me taking feminist ownership of Twilight, goddammit.
Hey, thank you so much for watching my video. I am not a YouTuber, but you can turn me into one by liking and subscribing. In this video, I talk about how Twilight works as a subversive power fantasy, so I want to recommend another subversive power fantasy, Riot Baby by Tochi Onyebuchi. Now, that is where the similarities to Twilight ends. It could not be a more different book. This is a book where black children are given power, but it doesn't really help them. The book ends up being more of a meditation on black grief and rage. By the end, it is just a black scream. And this book definitely helped me get through feeling powerless in the last couple of years. It was really good to just not try to fix anything, but to just feel all the rage, all the grief, and everything at once. You just should know going in that it was written for a black audience. But other than that, I do heavily recommend it. Again, thank you for watching my video. Come back next week. I'll be making a video on why Kristen Stewart is actually gayer than you think.